Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Renate McNay and my guest today is Adyashanti. Hello Adya.
Hi.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
And we are going to talk about Adya's awakening experience, his teaching and his life. And Adya has a whole pile of books which I think I'm going to show you at the end of the interview. We just start right away. So Adya, when you were 7 or 8 years old, you had already a very profound realization. And this realization was that people are suffering because they believe their thoughts.
Yes.
How did that impact you at that time?
Well, it's strange because I've told the story and many times when I've taught about being 7 or 8 and being very confused about the adult dimension, about adults.
Yes.
And why they acted the way they did, and it just seemed sort of odd. And one day I just had that insight, and the insight was, I get it. They're crazy. They're crazy. They believe what they think.
Yeah.
And somehow that just kind of came to me. And the interesting thing is when I had that insight, I felt a great relief because I didn't have to think about it anymore. I kind of understood something. It didn't make me, reject anything, or it didn't cause me any anxiety, anything. I just thought, oh, now I understand.
So what did
So I
you
can let go.
understand?
That they believe their mind.
And this is?
And this was why they were often acting, not just acting, but more, what I saw more was just in human communication. Because I was a real listener my whole life, real listener. There's nothing that went on in our household that I didn't know, because I would listen to everything that I could. And I would see in communication where someone would start to try to manipulate the conversation, or they would start to deflect something, or they would go into avoidance. And I could see all this at a very young age. And when they would say something that wasn't really real. And because I could see all this, it's confusing. When an adult sees the people that are supposed to know more and be more wise and more insightful, and I could see them that sometimes they were, but sometimes they weren't. It's confusing. What's going on there? Why did they? Why did they do that? It didn't. I was lucky because when I've told this story in public before, I found lots of people have had their own version of this insight very young in their lives. And the interesting thing is, for most of them that have shared it with me, what it produced in them was great anxiety, because they looked up to these adults who are their caretakers and their love providers and completely dependent, and they suddenly saw a flaw, and it really scared them. And most people concluded there must be something wrong with me when they had this insight. For whatever reason, I was very lucky. I didn't have that.
Did it affect your own thinking?
Sure.
So you stopped believing your own thoughts?
That would be nice if I could completely claim that.
You had to go through the whole thing.
I had to go through the whole thing. I really, I had to go through the whole thing. Sometimes we do have a wisdom when we're really, really young. But yet, we have to go through often the whole forgetting it, forgetting what we know.
So you
all
forgot
that.
this realization.
The realization was always there, but it didn't always have a great impact. In other words, I didn't always apply it to myself. Do you know?
I understand,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the most difficult thing.
Yeah, it didn't stop my mind from, claiming its sort of authority for quite a while.
So you had already as a child a lot of mystical experiences. And when you were 19, you went to your mother and you announced, my life is over.
Yeah, I had just been experimenting with meditation and reading some spiritual books. Most of them were on Zen, Buddhism. And I got intrigued by this idea of enlightenment. I didn't know what it was. I hadn't even formed a concept or an image of what it was, like something for me to chase. But I just read it, and when I read it, it was like, almost like something in me just exploded, and I just knew,
Caught fire.
this is it. I have to find out what this is. And yeah, I woke up one morning, and I just knew, that's it. Life as I knew it is over. I don't know what the life to come is going to be, but I know that this pull towards finding out what this enlightenment thing is, it's not something that I can take or leave. It's not something in my control. You know, it's something that kind of grabbed me.
Yes.
And it has hold.
Yes.
And that was a real shift.
How did you feel about that?
A strange combination of emotion. One of the emotions was a lot of excitement. I mean, it was like the ultimate adventure. You know, it was very, very exciting because I sensed intuitively great, great possibilities, almost infinite possibilities, without knowing what that even meant. Simultaneously, it was quite frightening.
I can imagine.
To realize the way I've led life, my very idea that I am the director of my own life and I have control over it and it's going to go where I want, to wake up and realize that that is not going to work for you anymore, that was also frightening. It was scary.
Yeah.
You know?
And what happened then?
Well, the journey began.
Yes.
You know,
you found your teacher?
Yeah, I found my teacher in the back of a book by Ram Dass. And she was the closest Zen teacher that I could find. And I expected to find a Zen teacher in traditional robes and in a temple and all that stuff. And she was a housewife in a town 15 minutes from where I grew up. And she taught out of her home. Very unassuming, very hidden. Yeah. There was never more than 12 to 15 people that were there when I was with her. The whole time I was with her.
So you were told to look at the wall, to sit and look at the wall.
Yes.
Is that what they do in Zen?
That's what they do in Zen. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So you meditated every day for 2 to 4 hours?
Yeah. Yeah. I meditated a lot.
And when you didn't meditate, what did you do? I was reading you were a bike racer and you trained.
Yeah. I hadn't stopped my athletic life, which was a very serious bike racing.
Yes.
So I would spend many, many hours a day riding my bike, training, you know, and then I took that same sort of a male, very male energy of a real willpower that I used in athletics. And it's very useful in athletics.
So very driven.
Very driven.
Very disciplined.
Very, very driven. And that capacity had really served me in life. Not only in athletics, but growing up as a child. I had learning disabilities, dyslexia. And I learned if I just decided I was going to learn something and just put all my willpower behind it, I could do it. So it was something that really worked for me.
Yeah.
And so I just transferred that willpower into my spiritual seeking.
And what did your teacher say to that? She must have realized it. Didn't she say, Adya, you need to slow down?
At a certain point, she did. At a certain point, when I would, tell her, how much I was meditating, and sometimes on the weekends I would take a day and meditate like from 4 in the morning till 12 at night. And, Zen is very encouraging of meditation.
Yeah.
So if your Zen teacher tells you might be doing too much, you're really driven. So she suggested that I maybe do a little less at times. And the teaching that I remember more than anything else when I would see her, she would often hold her hand up in front of her and she would just squeeze it and go, too much like this, not enough like this. Too much like this, not enough like this.
Did you understand?
Of course I understood what she was saying, but I was so lost in my driven spiritual seeking mode. There was nowhere for that teaching to land in me. I mean, even in the moment, my thoughts that I wouldn't share with her, but I would literally think, I don't have time. I don't have time to relax. I don't have time to let go. I have to find out what enlightenment is tomorrow. So that was...
I want to get it over with.
Immediately.
What was your fantasy? What's going to happen after enlightenment?
I didn't have a fantasy.
You don't?
I had no idea what it was,
Mm-hmm.
really. I had, because in Zen Buddhism, when you read about it, especially at that time, I mean, this is going back, close to 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't like it is now. There weren't all the teachings available and lots of Zen teachers and all kinds of spiritual teachers and teachings. There wasn't the webs. All this wasn't really happening.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of traditional old stories of old Zen masters, and they don't make any attempt to explain anything about enlightenment like we in the West would expect. They explain it in a way that's so direct that it sounds like nonsense.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even form an idea about it. I think my sense of it was which tied back into that insight as a little child, which was something about enlightenment has to do with reality. And reality has something to do with seeing things as they actually are, of not being trapped in your mind, not being lost, but actually having a real intimate connection with the real. Because what I saw as a child is it was very easy to lose connection with the real, that the world around me seemed to have lost it long ago.
So you saw this in your mystical experiences you had as a child?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was this yearning to find this again, what you experienced.
I didn't even link it back at the time
No.
to the childhood stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, only many, many years later did I make these ties back to what I had seen in childhood and certain things that I'd realized, certain experience that I had. But at the moment, at that time, I'd made no link between the two.
Mm-hmm.
There was a link,
Yeah,
but I
sure.
was not conscious of it. I was just driven.
So you were sitting all this time in front of the wall. What was going on inside you?
Well, a lot more than I would have liked. I had this very common idea that I needed to stop my mind. Not that my teacher ever told me to stop my mind. She didn't. She never told me that. But somehow I got this idea that my mind was the problem, and to stop it was at least part of the solution. Well, if you want to make your mind really noisy, just go around trying to stop it for hours a day. It just tends to increase the noise. So
Sure.
a lot of those times in meditation were actually spent in a lot of frustration, actually, of not being able to stop the mind. There would be moments or times when I would sit down and everything would just sort of settle very naturally. Mind would become very, very quiet. And I could sort of sense a depth. I hadn't had real realization at that point, but I could sense something very, very, very deep. But whenever that would happen, it would be quite spontaneous. It would just, in the midst of all the seeking and struggling, all of a sudden it would all just relax.
Yeah.
But so a lot of it was a combination of both. But since I was so driven, I would be very prone to getting very frustrated.
So, and at the same time, you must have a lot of patience because you did that for 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just drive. I was driven. I wouldn't say that I was patient at all. Just
No, I mean to stay with this
driven.
one teaching for such a long time.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
think you will get it eventually and stay with it, stay focused with it. It's 15 years.
It's strange, because again,
it is strange.
Yeah. I didn't know anybody did it any differently until I started to teach.
Yeah.
I literally had not a single spiritual friend the whole time I was sort of seeking. Because I was always usually the youngest kid in the room, And to me it was a very intimate, very private affair. I didn't even feel like I really needed to talk or wanted to talk to anybody about it. So the strange thing was, it never entered my mind to go seeking for other teachers. It never entered my mind that a teacher could somehow give me what I was looking for. It never entered my mind to do more spiritual window shopping was going to be useful in any way. They literally never entered my mind. I didn't realize till I started to teach that some of these kind of thoughts are actually common. A lot of people do, go through a really wide range of different teachers, different teachings, all of that. It never even occurred to me. Not a single time.
And then there was this day where you were sitting, trying to calm your mind down. And what happened?
Well, the first time when I was 25, it was my first opening.
Yes.
And strangely enough, for the 5 or 6 years before that, I had had this intuition, very clear intuition, that I was going to die at 25 years old. And I thought it was going to be physical death. What else could you assume?
Yes.
The strange thing is, again in retrospect, it never concerned me whatsoever. It was like a piece of information that was given to me, and my mind made nothing out of it. It was just like a fact. And I didn't have any relationship other than it was a fact, and somehow I knew it was going to be true. So fast forward, 25 years old, and I sit down to meditate, and I was really, really intentionally trying to have this breakthrough for a long time. I would walk the sidewalk, the streets going to work, and I would literally have this mantra in my head like, what is this? What is this? What is this? Because I felt like I had something inside of me, this intensity, this thing that wanted to be known. And it was almost like I got invaded by it, is how it felt. Like something came inside.
You were possessed.
That's what it felt like. And I would just literally, in my mind, what is this? What is this? What is this? All day long. And I used to think, I wonder what day I'll actually have some sort of psychotic break or psychological breakdown, because I knew that I couldn't sustain that intensity indefinitely. So I used to think about that. So anyway, one day I have this real intensity, and I sit down to meditate, and I just have this feeling of, this is it. I'm really going to somehow do it. And I sat down, it was like all my will just focused. Within a couple of minutes, I focused like I'd never focused. And right at that moment, I had an insight, which was, I can't do this. Yeah. It wasn't a great insight. It was like complete defeat. Just utter, devastating defeat. Like, not only can I not do this, this will never happen. I'm defeated. And as soon as I had that sense, I'm defeated, I cannot do this. This immense sort of opening.
So when you said, I cannot do that anymore, meaning the meditation.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
The spiritual search, the enlightenment, the whole project. I just met like this wall that I've been pushing and pushing and pushing on. Yeah. And I was defeated by it. Intellectually, emotionally, physically even, energetically, I was just completely defeated.
So.
And as soon as I was defeated, in the next instant, it started out as an energetic thing. I guess they would call it nowadays a Kundalini experience. Do you know? And I felt this immense rush of energy and started breathing quite heavily, and my heart started to beat.
Were you on your own?
I'm just sitting there meditating in my little meditation hut in my parents' backyard. Yeah. And having been an athlete, I knew what my maximum heart rate felt like. I knew what a heart rate of around 200 felt like. And my heart was beating way faster than that. And there was so much energy, the heart was beating, it felt like my heart was going to explode. I was breathing hard, and yet I'm sitting there meditating, I can't move. And I just had a thought, this is going to kill me. And the next thought I had, when I knew it was going to kill me, the next thought I had was, if that's what it takes, let's get it over with. And it wasn't like a courageous thought. It wasn't, like a masculine, fearless, okay, I'll do it. It was just a very simple, okay, I'll die. I'll die right here, right now. I'll let my heart explode. I won't move off this cushion. I won't go anywhere. And I really thought I was going to die, 100%. As soon as I thought, okay, I'll die now, all of a sudden I was instantly in a different, I don't even know what to call it, different dimension. I wasn't aware of my body anymore. Absolute darkness, total infinity of black. And I wasn't even there anymore. It was just this infinite, open, sort of black space. And after a while, what I could feel is there was like these insights coming, almost being downloaded through the top of my head into my body.
Yeah.
Like a computer program was being downloaded.
And what was the insights? Could you differentiate the information?
I couldn't. They were coming like 100 a second. Just way too many for me to have any conscious, but I knew they were insights. Just like, if you can imagine ahas going off like a popcorn popper. Mm-hmm. But so quickly you couldn't stop to really recognize what you just realized. And so there was this downloading of almost like information and ahas. And then, then slowly, after some time, I don't know how long, I became more aware of my body. And the energy had settled, everything settled, and after a while, I was just sitting there. Totally normal. Absolutely no high, no low, it just and I'm just sitting there. And I think, well, there's nothing left to do. I guess I'll get up. And I got up, and
You didn't have any afterthoughts?
Not at that moment.
What this blackness was?
Not at that instant. It was just so, looking back, it's almost strange. I didn't have these. I just thought, well, I guess I get up, and I got up, and I turned, and I did the bows, and I bowed to my Buddha statue figure that I was always there with the incense lit, and I bowed down, and by the time I got my head back up, I was just laughing hysterically. And I just looked at that Buddha, and I thought, I've been chasing you for years. And I could see that which I had been chasing was this that was chasing it. Mm. I didn't have any more definition than that. That was of what that was, what I was, what I'd been chasing, but I knew that what I had been chasing was what I am. And that's where the laughter came from. Just laughed and laughed and laughed. And then right in the middle of that, I turned and opened the door, and this voice that I'd always had, anytime I had even the smallest insight, this voice would always say, like, very good, now keep going. Mm. It was like this voice that would not let me settle for anything less than what was really real, ultimately true. And I used to get upset with it, because I would think, I had this nice insight. Let me
enjoy it.
Let me enjoy it. Give me a day. Give me a week. I've seen other people that have had insights, and they get to, think they've achieved everything, for at least a week or a month or two. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I turned around and opened the door, and that voice came in, and it just said, this isn't it. Keep going.
How did you feel about that?
Again.
Here you knew who you were.
I know.
And at the same time, something says, that's not it.
That's not it. Keep going. First of all, as soon as I heard the voice, I knew it was true. But I also knew that that voice wasn't discounting what had happened. It wasn't saying what you experienced was completely false and there's no truth and get rid of it and move on.
So it was not a super ego attack
or something.
No,
not at all.
It was a guidance, more like a guidance.
It was always like a guidance.
Yeah.
No, and I knew that what it meant was, this isn't it just meant, this isn't the all of it. Don't grasp this. Don't stop. Don't think you've arrived. Keep going. But yet I didn't feel like what I experienced in any way was being discounted. That it was, I knew that it was extraordinarily significant. You know, I knew it.
Yeah.
And I also knew when I heard the voice that there was more. There's more for me. There's more. There was a clarity that there was more to see. I didn't know what that meant, but.
But something big also happens. The seeker stops.
That's right. The seeker stopped.
Yeah.
All this, that drive,
Yeah.
the seeking of it, the strain, the struggle, the seeing it as separate, all, because I knew that I wasn't separate from what I was seeking anymore. It all just disappeared. I never had that seeking energy after that day, ever. And yet, I still would get up each morning and in the evening. I'd still do my meditation. Everything looked
the same.
Yeah. And most people would look at it and they might go, you were still seeking, but I wasn't. It was just, this is what I was to do. I just knew it was the thing to do. I couldn't, if someone said, why are you doing it? I couldn't tell you why, because there wasn't any seeking to it. But I just knew that this was the thing for me to do.
So what happened? So the seeker was gone, and yet you knew there is further to go for you.
Yes.
Did you feel you had to do something for that?
It never entered my mind that I either did or didn't have to do anything.
So you knew you just had to relax?
Just like that voice told me, keep going. And so then I would sit down in my meditation and I would, actually what started happening was what my teacher always told me. Just sit. Just sit. Don't just sit. And I used to try to just sit, which you can't, right? And now I could just sit. I would just sit. And if someone would ask me, what are you doing? I would say, I'm just sitting. I'm not doing anything. So meditation was a time when there could be total allowance to do nothing. I would call it the doing of nothing. The practice of doing nothing. And no seeking, no nothing. But I just knew this is what I am to do. There's more, and I was left with a question. I knew that that's what I had been seeking was what I was, what I am. But the question that came into my mind, now what exactly, precisely is this that I realize? I know it is what I am. I know it's not of time. I know therefore I can't die. I was never born. I know all that, I know that. But what exactly is this?
Yes.
That I am? And I could not, I didn't know that. I knew that I was it, whatever way it was, I was it. Not me as an ego, but me as it. I knew that. But so that question, that was what I was left with. What exactly is this that I am? And that took me another 7 years. About 6 or 7 years.
And then you started getting restless again with your athlete inside.
Oh, yes.
Started working really hard and being driven to become the world champion.
Well, the strange thing is, part of all that aftermath of that experience was my competitive athletic endeavors stopped making sense to me. So I would be like in a race, and I would be thinking, what am I doing out here? As soon as an athlete asks, what am I doing out here, your athletic career is over. As soon as that thought arises, forget it. That's too much clarity. It's not going to work. But, so as over the next few years, I stopped competing. But strangely, I kept training as if I was competing. I knew what was happening. I knew what I was doing was maintaining the identity of the athlete. Because the athletic identity, it has a lot of pluses to it. There's a sort of a physicality of strength, even though, I'm a little guy, but, I could ride a bike for 7 hours really fast. So there's a whole very positive identity that goes, that's who I had been for many, many years. And even though I knew that what I was doing, that I'm creating this thing, I'm maintaining this identity that's not true. I knew it wasn't true. But it was like there was that conditioning, and I couldn't not do it. I just couldn't not do it. And so I did it, and a few years later I got sick for like 6 months. All sorts of illnesses, that were undiagnosed, and serious, in bed for a lot of 6 months, and that crushed the identity. You can't be strong, super athlete man when you sat in bed for 6 months. You're really weak. And after those 6 months, I felt wonderful. To be free of that athletic, physical identity was wonderful. Wow, this is great. Be nice if I could tell you that it never came back. Time went on, and before I know it, like a drug addict or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you said
I
was addicted to the me.
I was addicted to that particular identity, yeah.
Yes.
Even though I knew it wasn't me.
Yeah. And did you know that this,
Strange.
you also knew that this is the very thing which probably was in the way?
Yeah, I knew that too.
To finish your path.
So it's strange to have a lot of consciousness about something, but not being able to stop you from doing it.
Did you find in your teaching, working with people, that's the most difficult thing? To go beyond self-identification.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
The identity. I've seen that people can actually have great insight at moments beyond it, and to see that that's not who they are.
Yeah.
And often that insight, it's not really enough to really break down that identification. It's like one transcends it, but it's like still there, lurking in the shadows.
Yes.
So that when I call it the honeymoon of your awakening, you come back from it, there will be that old identity waiting for you. And it often slips in like slowly and incrementally, and it's almost like you don't even know that it's happening until you kind of feel the lights go out a little bit again.
Yeah.
It's
And it has so many different faces.
Doesn't it?
Layers and layers and layers. I just was thinking, when your wife, Mukti, said to me she was in Vienna, I felt immediately, oh, Vienna. I felt my my identification.
Yeah.
It's all over. How can you ever get out of that?
No, it's everywhere. It's so many layers. It's so subtle.
Yeah.
So sort of has its tentacles everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so where were we?
So I'm still meditating, and then after the 6-month illness, I start writing, because I've always have what I call blue collar body. My body likes to work.
Yes.
And I had been very, very physical from the time I came out of the womb almost. I was walking before I was 1 year old, and that was just a part of, not so much of, intrinsically not an identity, just a way that one's hooked up.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that would start, and I would start to ride my bike, and it was really nice because I didn't have the identity, and if someone passed me, I didn't care. Oh, this is lovely. Yeah. But incrementally, it comes back, and before you know it, I'm training like I'm an Olympic athlete again. And yet, I'm not competing, I don't want to compete. I knew it was happening. I watched it, it was recreating this identity again, and once again, I was seemingly powerless to do anything about it. And so it got created again. Not as much as before.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a very wounded identity, because there was a lot of knowing that it wasn't really true, but nonetheless it came, and well, I got another 6-month illness. I had mono and a lung infection and a sinus infection and all this nasty stuff all at the same time, put me in bed, and crushed it.
So you had a lot of time to think about the identity.
Yeah.
And?
Yeah. And when I started to regain my health, then I had lost the taste for it. I had no aversion to it. But it wasn't, because I don't think it's so much that the identity goes away that's important as the taste for it, which is kind of a desire for it, but I think desire is such an abstract word, right?
Yes.
When we have the taste for something, where, that's what inclines us back towards it.
It's almost a whole bodily feeling.
Yeah, it's very physical, isn't it?
Yes.
And emotional and everything. Yeah, I didn't have
it's
it anymore.
It's a grabbing,
Yeah.
kind of. Yeah.
Yes, it's a grabbing. Yeah. Even if you don't want
you cannot
what you grab for.
Yeah.
So I didn't want it anymore. That second illness, I look back at both of those as purification events. And after the second illness, I'd somehow been purified of the taste, the wanting for not only that identity, but any identity. It just there was just no wanting in it. There was no draw, no pull. It wasn't that I even pushed anything away. It was just gone.
It did it all itself.
Yeah, with 2 6-month bouts of illness and 4 or 5 years, and
it took the time.
It takes whatever time it takes. We all live through kind of our lives. I think are tailor-made for our own awakening, our own clarity. Yeah.
And then one morning, you got up.
That was a few years later, after I'd met Mukti, my wife, and we had been married, less than 2 months. And it was really interesting. When we got married, I had a really feeling that this is a wonderful relationship. I cannot ask for more than this. I cannot ask for someone more than she is. It just was, from a relationship point of view, this is everything I'd ever wanted. And yet, somewhere inside, I realized one day, it's not enough. And what it wasn't enough, was I realized that spiritual thing, whatever that was, it was unfinished, undone. That putting this fantastic relationship, even that, wasn't going to satisfy that spiritual movement. Nothing was going to satisfy it. And I just thought, strange. Nothing's going to satisfy it. Nothing on the outside. Nothing. Nothing that anybody looks for. Soulmates and all this stuff. It's like I'll tell people, go find your soulmate, and you'll realize it might be wonderful for your relationship life, but it's not going to solve the deepest thing in you. And so that was just there, but of course now it was still the absence of seeking. But I still meditated. One morning I just sat down to meditate, and again, significant things for me in meditation happened immediately when I would sit down. Almost immediately, not after I got into some wonderful state. And I just heard a bird outside, and I heard the bird, and a question arose from my gut, not from my head. I literally felt it start in my gut and travel up my body and register in the brain. And the question was, who hears this sound? And as soon as that question came up, hit the brain, then there was just the bird, the hearing of it, the hearer of it. All of it was just one thing. There was no separation at all between me, the hearing, the bird, anything. It was just one event. And was surprisingly simple, surprisingly simple, and yet extraordinary in its own way. The thing was, though, at that moment, there was no emotional content. None. No ecstasy, no excitement, no nothing. It was completely devoid of any what I would call byproduct. It was just that pure knowing of one.
So is this, would you say, the witness collapsed?
Yes.
So you were the seer and the seen and the hearer and the heard That was just all the same.
All the same thing. All the same.
So you were gone.
You could put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was gone, and in a strange way, I showed up as I'd never shown up before. I, as a sort of a separate thing, separate from a bird or from you,
Yes,
or from
yes.
that was gone. But somehow, wow, something was
Yeah.
finally extraordinarily present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then something fascinating happened. It fascinated me when I read about it. You saw a string of pictures,
Oh yeah.
and you saw where you are trapped. I guess you as awareness was
Yeah.
trapped.
Yeah.
And as you put your attention,
On each one of those, yes.
yes,
So I got up.
yeah,
Again, I'm sitting there. There was just sort of the next thing to do was to get up. I had strange questions like, I mean, literally, the way I'm hooked up is very practical. So the first thing I thought, let me see something really practical. I looked at the stove. And I said, see, is it the same as the bird? Sure enough, it was. And then the thing was, I mean, it sounds silly to tell the story because it sounds so unspiritual, you know. I thought, what if I really push? How about the toilet? Let's open the door to the bathroom. And I looked in there and I thought, I'll be damned. Same. Right? There's no, the scene.
So you were the toilet.
The same, yeah. So I went to the most practical things, you know, because of course you a bird, okay, a tree, a cloud, a sky, of course.
It's very spiritual.
Right. I was, something in me was testing it, right
Yeah.
on. So at one point I was literally walking across what we call the living room. If you can call a 450 square foot cottage a living room, it's really just the room, which you could go through in 10 steps or less. And I'm walking across it, and then all of a sudden, any experience of unity or oneness just disappeared. And I don't know what happened then, because I wasn't aware of anything around me. And there was just absolute, an infinity of nothingness.
So that's when you said consciousness completely woke up.
I suppose one could put it that way. I probably have at a point in time.
So when you say nothingness,
it was like the knowing that was dawning then was that oneness arises from this. The knowing of oneness arises from this infinity of, it's like before something or nothing. So I call it nothingness, but it's, if one would think of nothing, an infinity of nothingness, and then just get rid of any idea of nothingness, which, you know, then one can't imagine, right?
Which is beyond.
Yes, right. Sort of like the Buddhist scripture would say, right? Beyond, going beyond, always going beyond.
Yeah.
And so that occurred. And then it was kind of like coming back in sequence from nothingness, from that nothingness, and then into the awareness of unity, right? And then, so it was almost like stepping down from the source, without losing it, though, without losing it.
Wow.
And then to answer or to talk about what you spoke about, and then very shortly after that, still I'm in the middle, standing in the middle of the living room, not even aware of the living room at that point. And then this string of this sort of vision, which I'm not mystically oriented. You know, I don't have lots of visions. I don't have, you know, lots of strange, that's not necessarily how I was oriented. But I did have this sort of string of, literally in this nothingness, I would see a string of what people would probably call past lives.
Yeah. Which is here right now at the same time.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how I like to always describe them. Like you had a dream at night and you dreamed you had past lives.
Yeah.
All those lives would be being created in the moment you were dreaming.
That's
so there's
right.
not any, it just feels like past.
Yeah.
So there was this feeling, and what I could see, and it was like literally like little pictures out in front of me. And I could go up to each one, and it was like going up to a knot hole in a fence. You know, when you get right up to the knot hole, then you can see everything on the other side of the fence. And all of a sudden, boom, all of a sudden I would be like in this other lifetime. And I would notice myself as someone in particular in that lifetime. And an event, something was going on. And each of those events, each of those little lifetimes were moments of confusion, sort of real core spiritual confusion. Lots of them had to do with death. You know, like one of them not even knowing what happened. You know, when I was drowning, it happened so fast I didn't even know I was dying. And I could see what had happened, and I could just go in, and the me in that moment, I could just literally just like whisper in its ear, you're dying. That's all. Whatever the point of confusion was, I could see what it was, I could go in, I could tell myself in that other life exactly what I needed to hear, and I could feel almost like in that scene, it would just let go. And it would just kind of let go, and everything would disappear. It was like that life was rectified. And then I'd go to the next one. And then there would be what I'd see in that past life, and I would see exactly what I needed to see to bring completion to it, or resolution. And then that would just disappear. And then I'd go to the next one. And each time I did this, it was as if, and this is all metaphorical because we're speaking about something that's actually timeless, but I can only speak about it as if it's in time. But each time there would be this resolution, I could feel like this energy of resolution going backwards and forwards in time. So I could feel the resolution back at that moment, in this event that seemed to happen, and I could feel it, a resolution in this moment, in this life stream. Because whatever happening then was affecting now. It was still alive, right? And it would just release. And I just went through the ones I was shown.
So when you said you could feel it still connected to this life, where did you feel it?
That's a good question.
If nobody was there, a sensation in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah. The whole idea at that moment of when I use these words like I could feel then and now, and I could go into this and I could go into that, there was no definition of what that I was at all. It wasn't like me as a particular person and me doing, none of that at all.
No.
It was really more, just consciousness doing it. And consciousness can go into its focal point, even like as we sit here, right? And if it comes into this focal point enough, then there can be the sense, or I call perfume of self, which is what I think all self gets created around this sense. But it's just a sense, and that sense gets created into something that seems solid, or it can be a sense, and at times that sense, it just totally disappears. But at the moment all this was happening, I was not even considering what that was, because it was all like just this play. I was on all sides of, right? On this side, on that side, everything.
I'm interested in what you said, that you actually, somehow we think the absolute is the end of the road.
Yeah.
But you didn't call it absolute.
Yeah.
You said you just cannot say it. Does it mean we never know who we really are? Is there a point when we go so deep into the mystery that we lose all?
Yes, that's my that's my experience. Is all the definers, even the subtle definers, which I'll use when I teach too. Awareness, consciousness. Sometimes I'll say an awake space. All these things, when they can be experienced, and yet what I would call the ultimate is that which is inconceivable, inexperienceable, unexperienceable. It cannot come into any of these categories that we usually put it in. You know, so it's almost like as soon as we open our mouth and talk about it, we're lying in a certain sense, with hopefully with good intention.
You cannot hit the point.
You cannot hit the point because, like I say, if you take something and then you take absolute emptiness, nothingness, and then you go really completely outside of duality, something and nothing. What's there when there's not even nothing? Imagination can't go there, can it? Mind can't go, imagination, experience, nothing can go. But something, that which is even beyond nothingness, before it, prior to it, that, it's there. And that's and it does know itself, but it knows itself as that which is completely, absolutely unknowable. If there's a defining characteristic, it's the unknowable. The unknowability is the defining characteristic. You know?
I went once to this place too.
Yeah.
And I asked my teacher, and he said, he gave a name for that, and he said, that's the divine coma.
Oh, I like that. The divine coma.
Yes.
That's rather graphic, isn't it?
Yeah, you immediately
Lovely.
can have a picture and the identification with it.
One could, I suppose. Yes, yes, yeah. But somehow there's an intuitive way of understanding that immediately.
Yes.
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 Yeah. It's there. It's always there.
Yes.
But you cannot see it.
Yes.
You cannot explain what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. That's the amazing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not explainable, even with the words we try to use very transparent wording, I think, often when we talk about this, because we're talking about something that's so transparent, it's almost not there.
Yes.
And yet even the transparent wording feels heavy, doesn't it? Feels, dense. And it's not even really, I don't even think it's, it's not even something you can really point to. You can't really teach about it. You know, if it happens for someone, then, you can be a mirror for them, or you can be a companion. Or you can give word to it like that. What was that word?
Divine coma.
Yeah. Yeah, and if someone's experienced that, they know what you mean,
Yeah.
and that's the humor of it, right? You tell someone who hasn't a divine coma, that's going to feel terrible.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Frightening.
Right. Right.
If you just...
Yeah.
Well, I'm aware of the time rushing ahead. Do you think, Adya, you reached some kind of end, or
No.
are you still, is it still expanding? Like the universe is expanding, we are expanding with it?
To me, it's sort of a paradox in description, because it's sort of that ultimate ground, which is outside of time, expanding, contracting, more, different, deeper, all of that. It is what it is. And yet, it itself has an infinite capacity to reveal itself.
Yes.
We can call that revealing of itself deepening, never ending. Or in the Buddhists would say, always being, always becoming.
Right.
Always being, always becoming. And that rings true for me. Always being. It's like this infinity is always, I always think of it almost like a jokester, like going, look what I can become.
Yeah.
I can become the greatest insight you've ever seen. Here, try me in that form. That will not exhaust me. Here, I'll give you this, try this, and try this, and try. And yet so I think of it as an inexhaustible infinity. In that sense, what reveals itself is infinite. But what is revealing itself is, there's never more nor less of it, is there? No more, no less, at any moment in time.
Well, It's a beauty, the mystery.
It is. Yeah.
I'm sorry we have to finish. Adya, it was wonderful talking to you. I just want to show some of your books. It's The End of Your World, which is, I just love this book. It's actually written for people who had an awakening experience or are awakened. A meditation book, which is CD inside, which I don't know how it's called. I lost the cover. True Meditation. Secret is Silence, poems, which are very beautiful, and Emptiness Dancing. It's a great title. And the last book Adya wrote is Falling into Grace. And if you go on Adya's website, you find lots and lots of wonderful CDs and teaching. So thank you for being with us.
You're very
Adya.
welcome. I enjoyed you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for watching Conscious TV, and I'm sure I see you again soon. Bye-bye.